единый период нерабочих дней для всей страны и для всех отраслей экономики завершается. Но не завершается борьба с эпидемией. Ее опасность сохраняется.
That's Russian President Vladimir Putin saying the period of non-working days for the whole country and for all sectors of the economy ends, but not the fight against the epidemic. It's not over. The danger remains, he added. Hello, everyone. This is Dana Lewis, and welcome to another edition of Backstory. As this was recorded, President Putin was in self-isolation outside of Moscow. His spokesman and his prime minister among those who were in hospital with COVID-19. Russia's number of new cases jumping more than 10,000 per day. So why was Putin announcing an end to restrictions and allowing people to go back to work? While outsiders believe his government lied about the number of people dying, and the stories of overcrowded, underfunded hospitals are reported by investigative Russian websites, but never mentioned, of course, by government-controlled TV. To understand what's really going on inside the country, where I was based for 12 years as an American TV correspondent, I reached out to Mikhail Kasyanov. He's the former prime minister who was fired by Putin in 2004 and who also leads an opposition party in Russia. And he joins me now from Moscow. Good to see you, Mikhail, again.
Hello, good to see you.
How are you personally doing? You're locked down like everybody else in Russia. You're at home with your family. It's been a number of weeks now.
Yeah, that's already months and a half. 8 weeks we're already sitting at home and self-isolation, and the regime imposed in Russia, just regime, it's not emergency situation, but something mixture. People don't quite understand which law is applicable right now, but people try to follow the government's instructions, but some people don't. But we see the situation is not good. It's not very good. 10,000 infections every day, the virus spreading, and it is quite a concern.
Are they handling this the right way?
I don't think so. First of all, that was a late reaction. And secondly, just economic financial support of people and businesses absolutely poor. And I think that will be a dramatic development during this year. I think we would lose more than 5% of GDP because Putin's government doesn't do anything in support. I think we will lose more than 10% of GDP. They're shrinking the economy by the end of this year.
Is he losing his grip? People seem frustrated there. And there is not the kind of economic aid that we're seeing in other countries. And a lot of business people that I still talk to say that they may never recover from this.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem, political problem for Mr. Putin. He's losing his, popularity, if we can say so. In fact, it was not 85%, but was like 45, 50%. And he is losing this public support, and especially in big cities when people realize, educated people living in the middle class, and they realize that they're losing their money, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their businesses, and just there is no response.
He originally downplayed this. And now he's outside of Moscow, appearing occasionally on television. But to me, and I want to do a reality check with you, he doesn't look like the tough guy we normally see, the captain of the ship, that somehow, to me, as he usually does, that he's delegated a lot of this to others, and he just doesn't seem himself. What do you think?
Yeah, you picked up just an interesting feature. That's correct. He looks unusually, I would say, not strong enough, although he uses the same strong words to express that everything is under control and everything just in operation. But in fact, he doesn't know what to do because his political plan was to have amendments to the constitution, to make a zero platform for himself, to be another 1 or 2 terms as a president of Russia. He losing this time. He cannot make this voting. It's not a referendum, but some kind of approval, people's approval. But right now, I don't think just people would go to vote, and he understands these. and May 9th parade of victory over Nazi Germany was postponed, and all these events he planned as a political agenda, as raising his popularity and demonstrating his, I would say, power and strength. All those features disappeared, and now just he had to allocate funds. He has a lot of funds, 10% of GDP and government reserve funds. It's not international reserves of central bank. That's another 500 billion of US dollar. But we're talking about 10% of GDP in ruble, which is a budgetary fund, which this fund was created by me, specifically for such, I would say, black days. These black days came, but Putin doesn't react. And people asking this question, why these funds are not used to help them.
He had to cancel the referendum to extend his term, to make constitutional amendments. But I mean, maybe that's not very significant because he'll just hold it again at another time.
It's significant for him because it was his decision and he wanted his decision to be supported. If it's not supported, that's already some kind of weakening. And he understands this, and people would immediately start looking at him as I would say, the not quite strong president. And that's very important psychologically for himself. He doesn't want to be looked at as weak. That's why just in everyday operation, it doesn't mean much. You're correct, just expressing this. But from the point of view of just the strength of Mr. Putin, and his reaction of all what's going on around, that's important. Important to get finalized, this plan to be finalized, but it is not.
You and I have known each other a long time. I mean, I followed you around Russia when you were campaigning to run as an opposition president. And you told me once that if oil slips, and I know you spend a lot of time on economics, that if oil prices slip, the economy slumps, that people who put up with Putin's authoritarian regime will tire of it very quickly, and he will lose power. Do you think we're there now?
That's not the case, but of course, I would say such fluctuations in their minds, that's already in place. And that's why that's so important for Mr. Putin not to spend money, because just the reserve fund, that's the only feature of a strengthening of his power. He understands that his popular support is quite low and falling down. And that's why he doesn't want to spend money, because just to have this helicopter money, that's important for him just later this year, even later this year. Because just in a few months, some kind of not organized demonstration will start to appear, because people are already complaining that they have nothing to feed their children. And that's why just the patience could lose very soon.
It's interesting that on mainstream television, of course, people carry the Kremlin's message, because you and I both know that the main channels are programmed by the Kremlin every day. So there's no freedom of press there. But people who live inside Russia, who follow a lot of the internet traffic and the digital traffic, say that the mood is changing and that there are a lot of jokes, and there is a lot of anger, and there is a lot of criticism of Putin and the prime minister and others.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. The negative attitude to Putin is growing. And it's hard time to Mr. Putin to decide. And in fact, he should start spending money to support people. He announced the program only for 1.8% of GDP, while all other European countries having this support with the maximum of or minimum of 10% of GDP of their support. And Putin has this money. That is not some kind of difficult, I would say, issue to find some way to borrow, etc. That's already existing fund to start spending and supporting small and medium-sized businesses and people in particular directly. Those people who losing their jobs and they have no money to feed their families. That is the issue, the critical issue. People's minds started to, I would say, to crystallize in a negative manner.
Mikhail Kasyanov, the former prime minister of Russia, a Democrat, somebody whose opinion I always respect and perspective we appreciate. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you for your nice words, Dana. Dana, you was great. Thank you. Great to talk to you.
We in the Western media often overanalyze the state of Putin's grip on the Kremlin. I mean, no matter what anyone says, he's still very popular. Even in this crisis, and he's managed to push decision-making now to local governors. So analysts say he can likely blame them when things don't go well. But I turned to one of the longest-serving Western reporters in Russia to get another measure on how Putin and Russia are faring in this crisis. Fred Weir is a journalist with the Christian Science Monitor. And Fred, I know you from my time in Moscow as a correspondent. I was there for 12 years, and I consider that a pretty great track record, but I sense you must be double that by now.
3 times almost. I came in 1986 and have been here ever since. I've lived here permanently ever since.
Has it gotten more difficult? Because people have asked me before, was it difficult to be a foreign correspondent based in Russia? Has it gotten more difficult for you? Do you feel you're writing the same stories about President Putin and his grasp on power endlessly with no kind of apparent progression?
No, actually, my newspaper, the Christian Science Monitor, has decided to reinvent itself as a kind of a daily news magazine thing, and they positively forbid us from writing the formulaic stories. You have to go out and find some slice of life or story under the story that generates momentum. It's a newspaper founded by a church, and they have this sense of mission. But I have found that it dovetails really nicely with my own personal journalistic instincts, because I am really sick and tired of the Russia stories that, the recipe, which usually revolves around Putin and his evil doings. But it doesn't explain this country. And so the Monitor has encouraged me to go out and do stuff. I've done all kinds of things from the North Caucasus, from Siberia. This is a huge, diverse country and very, very little of it ever gets covered,
Absolutely.
Outside Moscow.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. As we speak, I will have to bring you back to the news of the day in a sense that, there's a spike in coronavirus cases in Russia. Oil prices have hit bottom. Sanctions remain in place. People are locked inside. Businesses are failing. Putin doesn't appear to me to be a big guy in charge as he's always done. I mean, clearly he's in charge. But he seems less robust on TV, less strategic about this, because there's no one to blame, which has always been kind of his trademark craft, to blame the West. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that he has played what I think is a good role. I know I differ from a lot of people who can't seem to imagine that Putin would ever do anything sensibly, but he's stepped back. He's handed it over to a team of technocrats headed by Prime Minister Mishustin, who's now down with coronavirus himself, but also the Moscow mayor Sobyanin. They're very competent people, and they do all the heavy lifting. They do also all the bad news giving. Putin sometimes has video chats with local governors, and he gives these fireside chat type national addresses in which he announces good news and sounds reassuring.
I mean, is he doing that because that's the most efficient way of handling the crisis, or is he stepping back and putting it on other people's shoulders so he can blame them later?
He doesn't. Yes, that is the way the Russian political system has always worked. It's always been the wise czar and the bad boyars. It is an old formula in Russia, and Putin plays it to the hilt. But he also often plays on TV this guy who has his hand on the control panel and can handle absolutely everything. He gives these press conferences where he answers questions in depth and in detail about problems of sewage or schools that lack blackboards and things. So he isn't doing that now. And so he's criticized for not doing that. But I don't know. So far, you can't say that Russia has had a really remarkably good response to this crisis. I don't
say the least, right? I mean, a lot of people feel that they They started late. They downplayed it. They even suggested at one point on television there that the United Kingdom was responsible in Wuhan. You know, some preposterous propaganda on some of the television channels was fed to Russians.
You can find people saying idiotic things in various corners of the Russian media, but officially they haven't done that. You'd be hard pressed to find even their international language outlets like RT or Sputnik purveying disinformation. They're not doing that, and they're not doing it domestically. They've been pretty straight with people about how bad this is.
Let's talk about Russians. I mean, first, the healthcare system. I mean, I've done a lot of stories in Russian hospitals, and there appear now, and you know, the healthcare system was dismal at different points, and I don't know what it's like today, but there's some dim stories coming out of hospitals where doctors are locked inside, sick themselves, trying to combat this in an underfunded and really desperate healthcare system.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially in the provinces. And it's also true in like half a dozen other countries. So Russia is not alone in this. I don't think they've done anything exceptionally bad. But what is it? That man once said, you go to war with the army you have. So anyway, Russia's got the healthcare system it has. It's been severely reformed with quotation marks in the past 10 years or so. So all those local Soviet hospitals and clinics across the country were closed down. And they did invest in big regional hospitals, specialized hospitals. This was actually Western advice on how to remodel your healthcare system. And a lot of people are saying now that the Soviet healthcare system would have worked much better because it's localized. It means that most of these coronavirus cases can be handled could have been handled by these Soviet clinics with paramedics. Most people don't require like intensive care. So they would have really limited the movement of people in regions. And these big hospitals, as they have everywhere, become vectors of transmission, spread it far and wide. They also don't have this system of nursing homes in Russia. It's very underdeveloped. And that's another thing that has seemingly become like critical hotspots in other countries. But so far, I mean, it's hard to know. They're still on the upswing.
You wrote about small business and that it's about 20% of the economy. They are under huge pressure, are they not? I mean, because I know some businessmen in Moscow who say that they are barely surviving and probably considering going out of business.
A nightmare for them. First of all, they're a new phenomenon in this country. They're not well. You don't have any well-established small businesses here, and they are never at the top of anybody's priority list. And they often, like small businesses do everywhere, live very close to the ground. You've got your street traffic. You've got, if you're a cafe or a restaurant or something, you've got certain things you depend on. And if that stops, you're gone. And government aid has not really stepped in. It's rhetorical at this point. Putin did promise wage subsidies for workers in small businesses, and they're supposed to get zero interest loans. But banks don't distribute this. I mean, it's clear the banks give priority to big business and larger established businesses. And as always, short shrift goes to the small businessmen. So yeah, it is quite possible that when this thing lifts, that infrastructure of small businesses that was just starting to really appear, like Moscow in the past decade or so, has really transformed. It has all kinds of restaurants, cafeterias, many levels of consumer services that could all be gone.
You said in one of your articles, 3 million people have left Moscow. I mean, that's a quarter of the city.
Yeah, they can do that because Russians tend to have a dacha, a country place. Always did, even in Soviet times. And you just go there and camp. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm living in a village outside of Moscow in what we call our dacha, but we actually live here. But lots and lots of people around us are, they're staying, they live in Moscow and work in Moscow, but they've come out here for the duration.
Is that a good thing? Does that mean that the city is less dense? It's already a very densely populated city. Or does it create a problem where they go out into places like Barvika, where they're transporting the virus out to maybe regional areas that are ill prepared to handle that many people coming to hospital?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a clear and unambiguous answer to that, but I think it's good. People, first of all, most services are holding up, like a grocery delivery and things. So far, so good. We're in the 5th week of it now, and we just got our grocery delivery, and everything was there. So I think it's better to have people out of the city. It's always better to be in the countryside, and the weather is mostly good now. And you can do social distancing better out here. Although in our Pasiolok, our village, there are 7 cases registered. So we've got it here. There's no escaping from it.
If there is a mounting challenge or a right-hand turn that you see coming in the road, what will it be?
I don't know. I think it depends how long this goes on, because as you said in your introduction, Russia is under intense pressure. It's not just this coronavirus thing. It's ongoing sanctions and oil prices that have just collapsed again. And you have to admit, if you're sitting in my chair and having to analyze this stuff every day, that Russia has survived the past 6 years with that double whammy: low oil prices, Western sanctions. They not only have survived, but they've built up their state finances, balanced the budget. They've done a lot of defensive things. So they're not in a bad position to handle this. But if it goes on, there's just no country is going to survive as it was if this is another 6 months or something.
Well, we wish you well, Fred. And of course, Russia, prayers to all those people struggling through this crisis. Fred Weir, a friend and one of the best news correspondents you can read, writing about Russia, from Russia, in the Christian Science Monitor. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Dana.
May 9th, 75 years ago, Russia declared victory over Germany after 30 million Russians died fighting the Nazis. This year, the victory celebration on Red Square was canceled because of COVID-19. Several hundred soldiers were already sick with the virus, just rehearsing that event. But Russians are resilient, and we wish them well. I have many Russian friends. To them and everyone, good health. I'm Dana Lewis, and that's our latest edition of Backstory.